hung in the air. Her eyes were swollen from weeping. Her hands trembled as they clutched the cold fingers of the man who had once been her strength. "Please, Daniel," she whispered brokenly. "You said we'd grow old together. You promised we'd raise Emily side by side. How am I supposed to do this alone?" From the corner of the room, a small voice called out softly, "Mummy, why is Daddy sleeping?" Sarah turned to see Emily, her 3-year-old daughter, holding her worn-out teddy bear, staring innocently at the still figure on the bed. Sarah gathered her close, pressing the child's face against her chest. Her tears soaked into the little girl's hair. "Daddy's gone to be with God, sweetheart. He's resting now." The sound of her grief filled the tiny house, spilling into the quiet yard where neighbors had gathered. Among them stood Laura Miller, Sarah's childhood friend and closest confidant. She stepped inside, knelt beside Sarah, and placed a comforting arm around her. "Sarah, you must take heart," Laura said gently. "Daniel was a good man. God knows why he called him home so soon." Sarah nodded weakly, though her heart screamed in protest. Life without Daniel seemed unimaginable. Scene 2, the weight of widowhood. The days that followed blurred together. The funeral came and went like a storm that left wreckage behind. People offered their condolences, but once the last handful of earth hit the grave, the world moved on. Sarah was left with silence, bills, and a child who still asked every morning when Daddy would come home. Daniel's brother, Michael, came by one afternoon wearing a look of forced sympathy. "Sarah," he began, "you know Daniel's savings account was in both our names. I'll handle the remaining funds and the property documents for now." Sarah frowned, confused. "Handle? Michael, Daniel built this house for his family. You can't just..." He interrupted coldly. "It's family property. You can stay here for now, but you can't sell or make changes without consulting me." His tone was final. When he left, Sarah collapsed onto the couch, clutching Emily's photograph. "Even in death, Daniel, they won't let us be," she murmured bitterly. Her small farm yielded just enough vegetables to survive. She tried selling jam, mending clothes, anything to earn a little money. But it was never enough. Each night she lay awake listening to the wind rattle the windows and wondered what future awaited her daughter. Scene 3, A Friend's Council. One warm afternoon, Laura came to visit carrying a basket of freshly baked bread. Sarah sat outside beneath the oak tree, lost in thought, staring at the worn shoes by the doorway. "You've been thinking again," Laura said, handing her a piece of bread. "I can tell by that look in your eyes. What's on your mind?" Sarah sighed deeply. "Laura, I can't keep living like this. Everything reminds me of Daniel, and the little I make barely feeds Emily. I've been thinking, maybe I should go to the city." Laura blinked. "The city? Which one?" "London," Sarah replied quietly. "I've heard there's work there, cleaning, catering, anything. I'll do whatever I can. I just need to build a better life for Emily." Laura stared at her, stunned. "London is no village, Sarah. It's a jungle of strangers. And what about Emily? You can't take a child into that chaos." "I know," Sarah whispered. "That's why I'm asking you to look after her. For a while. I'll send money and come back for her as soon as I'm settled." Laura's eyes softened with sadness. "You're asking a lot, my friend." "I know." Sarah's voice trembled. "But I trust you, and I trust God. Please, Laura. Emily deserves more than this life of scraping by." There was a long silence before Laura finally nodded. "All right, I'll take care of her. But promise me, Sarah, write often. Let me know you're safe." Sarah managed a faint smile. "I promise." They sat together, the golden sunlight spilling between the leaves, two women holding on to faith against the weight of an uncertain tomorrow. Scene 4, the farewell. The morning of Sarah's departure came too quickly. The sun had barely risen when the old bus arrived, its engine coughing out gray smoke. Sarah's meager belongings fit into one small suitcase: 2 dresses, a worn Bible, and a framed photograph of Daniel and Emily. Laura helped her fasten the suitcase shut while little Emily clung to her mother's skirt, crying uncontrollably. "Mummy, please don't go." Sarah knelt down, holding her daughter's face in her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I'm going to find us a better life, my love. I'll come back for you. I swear it. The driver honked impatiently. Sarah hugged Laura tightly. Please look after her like your own. Laura nodded, blinking away tears. Go, Sarah. May God go with you. As the bus rolled away down the dusty road, Emily ran after it shouting, Mummy! Mummy! Until her tiny legs gave out. Laura scooped her up, whispering, It's all right, sweetheart. Your mummy will come back. She will. But even as she said the words, her heart quivered with doubt. Scene 5, Arrival in the city. The journey to London took nearly a full day of travel, transfers, and exhaustion. When Sarah finally stepped off the coach into the bustling city, she was overwhelmed. The noise was deafening. Car horns, voices, music, sirens. The smell of fried food and exhaust filled the air. Towering buildings surrounded her like silent giants. She clutched her suitcase tightly, feeling small and out of place. People brushed past without a glance. A young man selling newspapers called out, Paper! Evening paper! Sarah stopped him timidly. Excuse me. Where could I find a room to rent for the night? He looked her up and down. Try down Eastbrook Street. Cheap but not fancy. Thank you. She followed his directions, eventually finding a shabby inn with peeling paint and a flickering sign that read the Rose and Crown. The room was tiny, the mattress thin, the air damp with mold, but it was shelter. That night she knelt beside the bed and prayed. Lord, I don't know anyone here, but I believe you brought me this far for a reason. Please help me find a way. Scene 6, The Search for Work. The following weeks were a blur of effort and disappointment. Sarah walked from one end of the city to the other, asking for work. Sorry, we're not hiring. You need experience. We don't take live-ins anymore. Her shoes wore thin, her savings dwindled, but she kept going. Some days she ate nothing but a slice of bread. Yet she refused to give up. One afternoon, as she rested on a park bench, an elderly woman approached her. You look exhausted, dear, the woman said kindly. Are you looking for something? Yes, ma'am. Work, if there's any. The woman smiled. I'm Mrs. Henderson. I run a small cafe near the station. My kitchen girl just left for school. Can you start tomorrow morning? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much. That night, she cried again, this time out of gratitude. The job was hard, but Sarah embraced it. She woke before dawn, washed dishes, scrubbed floors, and helped prepare breakfast for the early commuters. The pay was small, but enough to cover her rent and send a little to Laura for Emily. Every Sunday she wrote letters. My dearest Emily, Mummy misses you every single day. I'm working in a cafe now, and I'm saving to bring you here soon. Be a good girl for Aunt Laura. I love you endlessly. Laura read the letters to Emily, who listened wide-eyed, clutching the photograph of her mother. But months passed and the letters slowed. Scene 8, The Man Behind the Wheel. It was a rainy evening when James Carter first walked into Mrs. Henderson's cafe. His coat was soaked, his hands cold, and his eyes tired from long hours behind the wheel of his delivery van. One cup of tea, please, he said, smiling politely. Sarah served him with her usual calm grace. He thanked her warmly, and from that day on he became a regular. Sometimes they exchanged a few words, sometimes just a smile. Gradually, small talk turned into deeper conversations. About life, about dreams, about loss. James was gentle, humble, and kind. He never pushed, never pried. He would often tease, a beautiful woman like you shouldn't be buried in kitchen steam all day. Sarah would laugh softly. It's honest work. That's all that matters. He nodded. Still, you deserve better. Something in his sincerity touched her heart. Yet she guarded her feelings fiercely, for Daniel's memory was still sacred, and Emily's face haunted her thoughts each night. Scene 9, The Missing Letters. One day Sarah tried to call Laura, but the line was disconnected. She wrote another letter and waited. Weeks passed, no reply. She wrote again. Nothing. Fear began to creep in. What if they moved? What if Emily's sick? She whispered anxiously one night. Mrs. Henderson noticed her distress. Is everything all right, dear? Sarah forced a smile. It's nothing, ma'am. Just missing my little girl. But in her prayers that night, she poured out her heart. God, please protect Emily. Watch over her until I can hold her again. Don't let anything happen to her. Rain lashed against the window as if heaven wept alongside her. Scene 10, end of part 1. Weeks later, life in London settled into a fragile rhythm. Sarah worked, prayed, and hoped. Yet every time she saw a little girl on the street clutching her mother's hand, her heart ached. As she walked home one night through the drizzle, the lights of the city flickered on the wet pavement. Cars hissed by. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed. She stopped at a crossing, her umbrella trembling in the wind, and whispered to herself, I will go back for you, Emily, no matter how long it takes. The camera pans upward. The city glows beneath a cloudy sky. Behind her lies grief. Ahead of her lies the unknown. But her journey has only begun. Scene 1, the echo of time. 2 years had passed since Sarah Thompson left Ravensfield for London. The seasons had come and gone. Winters of biting cold and summers of long workdays. But her dream remained the same. To bring Emily back to her side. Sarah had grown thinner but stronger. Life in London had toughened her. She had learned to navigate its streets, endure its pace, and survive its loneliness. At Mrs. Henderson's cafe, she was no longer the shy new helper. She managed the morning shift now, greeting regular customers with a warm smile that hid the ache of longing in her heart. Yet, every night, when she returned to her small rented room, she would sit by the window, open her old box of letters and whisper, Soon, my darling Emily. Soon. But the box was filled only with unanswered letters. Letters she had sent to Laura, never returned. Scene 2, shadows of silence. One Saturday evening, Sarah sat at her small wooden table, pen in hand, writing another letter. My dearest Laura, it's been months since I heard from you. I'm beginning to worry. How is Emily? How are you? Please write back. Even one line would mean the world to me. She sealed the letter, kissed the envelope, and the next morning dropped it in the postbox on her way to work. The weeks that followed brought no reply. At night, her dreams turned dark. Of Emily calling out to her from afar, of Laura walking away, her back turned. Sarah often woke with tears on her cheeks. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the sky, she pressed her forehead against the window pane and whispered, Why, God? Why can't I hear from them? Are they safe? There was no answer, only the sound of the rain. Scene 3, the unexpected visitor. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. Mrs. Henderson wasn't in yet, but the bell above the door jingled, and a familiar voice called out, You're early today. It was James Carter, the delivery driver she had befriended months ago. He placed a box of supplies on the counter and smiled. You look like someone who hasn't slept. Sarah chuckled softly. You're right. I haven't. Too many thoughts. Still worrying about your daughter? He asked gently. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I haven't heard from them in almost a year now. James leaned on the counter, concern etched on his face. Have you thought of going back to check on them? Sarah hesitated. I want to, but I can't afford to leave. I've barely saved enough for rent. And if I lose this job, everything falls apart. James was silent for a moment, then said quietly, You're carrying too much on your shoulders, Sarah. You deserve help. She smiled faintly. Thank you, James. But I'll manage. I always do. As he left, he turned back and said, One day, you won't have to manage alone. His words lingered in her heart long after he was gone. Scene 4, the offer. A few weeks later, Mrs. Henderson called Sarah into her office. My dear, she began, I've noticed how hard you've worked since the day you arrived. You've been loyal, kind, and dependable. Thank you, ma'am, Sarah said, surprised. I've decided to open a new branch of the cafe in Oxford, and I want you to manage it. It'll mean better pay and a small apartment included. Sarah's heart skipped. Manage it? Me? Mrs. Henderson smiled warmly. Yes, dear. You've earned it. Think of it as a fresh start. Sarah could barely contain her joy. That night she knelt beside her bed and cried. Thank you, God. You're opening doors for me. But amid her gratitude, the longing for Emily stabbed sharper than ever. What success without family? She thought. Still, she accepted the offer, praying that perhaps this blessing was the step toward bringing her daughter home. Scene 5, The Storm in Ravensfield. Far away, in the quiet village of Ravensfield, life had not been kind to Laura Miller either. After Sarah left, Laura cared for little Emily with all her heart. But when her husband lost his job at the sawmill, the household began to crumble. Feeding 2 children and another woman's child became difficult. She sent letters to Sarah at first, but when money ran out and postage became impossible, the letters stopped. Then, one tragic night, Laura's husband fell ill and died. The weight of bills, grief, and poverty nearly broke her. Desperate, she made a painful decision, one that would change everything. A wealthy couple, Mr. and Mrs. Graham, who owned a large estate on the outskirts of town, had been looking for someone to help with house chores. When they met Emily, with her bright eyes and sweet manners, they took an immediate liking to her. Laura hesitated, but they promised to take good care of the girl, to send her to school and provide her with all she needed. In her despair, Laura agreed. And just like that, little Emily Thompson, only 5 years old, was taken to live with the Grahams. Laura cried as she watched the carriage roll away. Forgive me, Sarah, she whispered. I only wanted her to have a better life. Scene 6, The Empty Letters. Months later, when Sarah's letters began to arrive again, Laura couldn't bear to open them. Each envelope felt like a dagger of guilt. How could she tell her friend the truth, that she had given her daughter away, not knowing if she'd ever see her again? So she did nothing. She burned the letters one by one in the fireplace. Her heart ached with every flicker of flame. Scene 7, Blossoms of Hope. Back in Oxford, Sarah's new life began to take shape. The new cafe, Henderson's Corner, was bright and busy. Customers loved her friendly warmth. James, who had transferred his delivery route to Oxford, often stopped by. He helped with supplies, fixed broken shelves, and occasionally brought her lunch when she forgot to eat. They became inseparable friends. One evening, after closing, James invited her to walk along the riverbank. The sunset reflected on the water, painting everything gold. Sarah, he said softly, you've spent years taking care of everyone else. When will you let someone take care of you? She looked at him, startled. James, I know you're still healing, he continued, but maybe you could let someone in, someone who truly cares. Tears filled her eyes. You've been nothing but kind to me. One rainy afternoon, a postman arrived at the cafe, asking for Sarah Thompson. She frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. That's me. He handed her an envelope, damp from the drizzle. The handwriting was unfamiliar. She tore it open quickly, her hands trembling. Dear Madam, my name is Mrs. Graham. I believe you are the mother of a young girl named Emily Thompson. She has been in our care for some time, left with us by Mrs. Laura Miller. I regret to inform you that Mrs. Miller passed away last month. Emily is safe and doing well. Please contact us if you wish to reunite with her. Sincerely, Margaret Graham. Sarah's knees gave way. She dropped to the floor, clutching the letter to her chest. Tears flowed freely. Emily, my child, she whispered. James, who had just walked in, rushed to her side. Sarah, what happened? She showed him the letter with shaking hands. He read it, his expression turning from confusion to compassion. Sarah, this means she's alive. She's safe. Sarah nodded, crying harder. But Laura, she's gone. She was my sister in all but blood. Why didn't she tell me? James helped her to a chair. You can ask later. Right now, you have to go to her. Scene 9, The Journey Home. Within a week, Sarah arranged to travel back to Ravensfield. Mrs. Henderson granted her leave and even gave her extra money for the journey. James insisted on driving her all the way. "You shouldn't go alone," he said firmly. The road stretched endlessly, cutting through hills and fields. For hours, neither of them spoke. Sarah gazed out the window, lost in memories. Of Daniel's laughter, of Emily's tiny hands, of the day she'd boarded that bus years ago. At last, the car turned onto the familiar dirt road that led to her old village. Everything looked smaller now, quieter, almost frozen in time. When they arrived at Laura's cottage, the sight broke her heart. The once lively home stood empty and silent. An elderly neighbor came out and said sadly, "You must be Sarah. Laura's gone. She passed in her sleep." Sarah wept openly, kneeling by the doorstep. "She took care of my child, even when life took everything from her." James rested a hand on her shoulder. "She did what she thought was best." Through her tears, Sarah whispered, "Then I'll do the same. I'll bring my daughter home." Scene 10, the reunion. The next morning, they drove to the Graham estate, a grand brick house surrounded by rolling fields. Sarah's heart pounded with every step up the gravel path. A maid opened the door. "You must be Mrs. Thompson. Come in, please." Mrs. Graham, a kind-looking woman in her 50s, met her in the drawing room. "Mrs. Thompson," she said warmly, "we've been expecting you. Emily is in the garden." Sarah's breath caught. "May I see her?" "Of course." She followed her outside, her steps trembling. There, beneath the apple tree, a young girl in a white dress sat reading a book. Her golden curls framed a face so familiar that Sarah almost forgot to breathe. "Emily," she whispered. The girl looked up, confused at first. Then her eyes widened. The book slipped from her hands. "Mummy!" Sarah rushed forward, falling to her knees, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Yes, my darling. It's me. I'm here." They clung to each other, both crying, both laughing. The years of distance melted away in that single embrace. Mrs. Graham watched from a distance, tears in her own eyes. "She's a wonderful child, Mrs. Thompson. We only wanted to keep her safe." Sarah turned, still holding Emily close. "You did more than that. You gave her a life. I can never thank you enough." Scene 11, the promise. That evening, as the sun set over the estate, Sarah and Emily sat together under the apple tree. "Mummy," Emily said softly, "Aunt Laura told me you were working in the city to make money. Did you find what you were looking for?" Sarah smiled faintly, brushing her daughter's hair. "Yes, sweetheart. I found hope and a way back to you." Emily laid her head on her mother's lap. "Can we go home now?" Sarah looked toward the horizon. The city lights faint in the distance and said, "Yes, my love, but not just yet. There's still one more thing I must do." Scene 12, the wheels turn again. The next morning, as they packed their few belongings, James walked up the garden path. He smiled when he saw them together. "So this is the famous Emily." Emily grinned shyly. "Are you Mummy's friend?" James laughed. "Something like that." Sarah smiled warmly. "He's the one who brought me here, darling." Emily looked at him curiously. "Then you're a hero." They all laughed, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt peace. As they drove away from the estate, the road stretched ahead. Not a path of loss this time, but of renewal. Sarah looked at her daughter asleep in the back seat, then at James behind the wheel. She whispered softly, "Thank you, God. The wheels that took me away have brought me home again."
The morning sun glimmered on the dusty road as Sarah Thompson's car rolled back into Ravensfield. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. Beside her sat Emily, gazing out the window with wonder, her small hands clutching a teddy bear. "Is this where you grew up, Mum?" she asked softly. Sarah smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. This is home." The little village looked older now, quieter. Many of the familiar faces were gone, replaced by new ones. The cobblestone paths, once filled with laughter, now carried only echoes of memories. They stopped in front of a small cottage, the same one where Sarah and Daniel once lived before tragedy struck. Sarah took a deep breath, holding Emily's hand. "We'll make it warm again," she whispered. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. The furniture was covered with white sheets, and the walls held faded memories, photographs of happier times. Emily ran her fingers across a framed picture on the shelf. "Is that Daddy?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, that's your father, Daniel. He loved you more than words can say." Emily studied the photo, then smiled. "Then I'll love him for both of us." Sarah hugged her tight, tears silently falling down her cheeks. The first few weeks back were difficult. The cottage needed repairs, the roof leaked, the stove barely worked, and money was tight. Sarah returned to the only job available in town, working as a cleaner at the local Ravensfield primary school, the same one Emily would soon attend. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Each morning, she woke before dawn, packed Emily's lunch, and walked her to school. Emily, bright and cheerful, quickly became one of the top students in her class. After dropping her off, Sarah would roll up her sleeves and mop the corridors, scrub the windows, and polish the desks. She'd often glance at the classroom door, watching her daughter laugh with friends, and whisper to herself, "This is worth everything." But at night, exhaustion hit hard. Bills piled up faster than her paychecks. Sometimes dinner was just bread and tea. Still, Sarah never complained. "Emily," she'd say at the table, smiling, "we may not have much, but we have love. That's enough." And Emily would nod and hug her mother tightly. James Carter hadn't returned to London after helping Sarah find Emily. Instead, he rented a small workshop in town and started a delivery business. He often stopped by Sarah's cottage, bringing groceries or helping fix things around the house. "Your roof's still leaking," he said one Saturday, climbing down the ladder with a grin. "Good thing you have a friend who knows his way around a hammer." Sarah laughed. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you're looking for excuses to visit." He shrugged. "Maybe I am." Their laughter echoed across the quiet yard, a sound that slowly brought life back into the old house. Emily adored James. She'd wait for him by the gate every weekend, shouting, "Uncle James, did you bring the chocolate?" He always did. But deep inside, Sarah wrestled with her emotions. Was it too soon to let another man into her heart? Was it betrayal to love again? Late at night, she'd sit by the window, looking at Daniel's photograph. "Would you be angry?" she whispered. "He's kind to me, Daniel. He makes Emily smile. But my heart, it still remembers you." The night answered with silence. One morning at the school, Sarah overheard two teachers talking in the corridor. "Did you hear about the new inspector coming from the city?" one said. "He's supposed to evaluate the staff and facilities." The other chuckled. "I hope he doesn't notice the leaky roof. Poor Mrs. Thompson has been trying to get it fixed for months." Sarah smiled faintly and went back to work, unaware that the arrival of that inspector would soon change everything. A week later, the inspector arrived, Mr. Richard Lawson, a tall man in his 40s, with calm eyes and an air of authority. As he walked through the school halls, clipboard in hand, Sarah moved aside to let him pass. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded politely. "Good morning." "Good morning, sir," she replied, lowering her gaze. But something about her face caught his attention. A softness, a quiet strength. Later that day, when he saw her helping a group of children pick up fallen books, he smiled. "You seem to handle more than your fair share of work here." Sarah chuckled. "Comes with being the cleaner, sir. Someone's got to keep the place running." He looked impressed. "It's rare to see such dedication. I'll make sure the report reflects that." Sarah blushed slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. That was the beginning." Over the next few weeks, Richard often returned to the school for follow-ups. He'd find excuses to stay longer, sometimes helping Sarah fix a window or carry supplies. They talked about books, life in London, and their shared love for quiet mornings. One afternoon, as they stood outside watching the children play, he said softly, "You have a beautiful daughter." Sarah smiled proudly. "She's my reason for everything. She reminds me of someone I once knew," he said quietly, almost to himself. She tilted her head. Someone you lost? He nodded. My wife. She passed 5 years ago. It's just me now. Sarah's heart softened. I'm sorry. Loss never leaves. Does it? He shook his head. No, but sometimes it teaches us to love deeper. Their eyes met, and for a moment time stood still. In a small town, whispers travel faster than wind. Soon, people began to talk. Have you seen how often Mr. Lawson visits the school? And how Sarah Thompson always happens to be around? Sarah tried to ignore the gossip, but it hurt. She didn't want to be misunderstood, especially not when she was finally rebuilding her life. One afternoon, she confronted James, who had been unusually quiet lately. You've barely spoken to me these days, she said. James sighed. I hear things, Sarah. People are talking. About you and this inspector. She frowned. So you believe them? He shook his head. No, but I care about you. And Emily. I just don't want you to get hurt. Sarah's voice softened. James, I never meant to push you away. You've been my rock. But I can't hide from life forever. Maybe I deserve to feel something again. James nodded slowly, pain flickering in his eyes. Then promise me one thing. If he hurts you, I'll be here to pick up the pieces. Weeks passed. One evening, after school hours, Sarah stayed behind to finish cleaning. Richard appeared at the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. She smiled. You read my mind. They sat together, the quiet hum of the night around them. I've been thinking, he began, hesitating. You faced so much loss, sacrifice, pain. Yet, you still find the strength to smile. That's rare. Sarah looked down, touched. Smiling doesn't mean I'm not broken. It just means I'm choosing to live. He reached out, gently covering her hand with his. Then maybe we could live together? She froze, heart pounding. Richard, she whispered. I can't promise anything. My past is still part of me. I'm not asking you to forget, he said softly. Just to let me walk beside you. Tears welled in her eyes. For years she had built walls around her heart. Now someone was asking to climb them. After a long silence, she whispered, maybe we can try. At first, Emily didn't understand. She liked Mr. Lawson. He brought her books and taught her how to plant flowers. But she didn't want to share her mother's love. One night, as Sarah tucked her in, Emily asked, Mom, if Mr. Lawson becomes part of our family, will you still love me the same? Sarah's heart broke. She knelt beside the bed. Oh, my darling. Nothing will ever change how much I love you. You're my heart. Mr. Lawson is just someone who makes us smile. Emily thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. Then maybe he can stay. Sarah kissed her forehead, whispering, You're wiser than most adults. Just when life seemed to find balance again, tragedy struck. One afternoon, while returning from school, a car lost control and veered onto the sidewalk, heading straight for Emily. Sarah screamed her daughter's name, running with all her strength. James, who happened to be nearby, threw himself forward, pulling Emily out of harm's way. But the car clipped him, sending him crashing into the ditch. James! Sarah cried, running to him. He was bleeding, his breath shallow. Is she okay? He gasped. Yes, Sarah sobbed. She's safe. You saved her. The ambulance came quickly. For hours, Sarah waited outside the hospital room, praying. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was grave but gentle. He's stable, but he'll need time to recover. Sarah wept in relief. When she entered the room, James looked pale but smiled weakly. Told you I'd always be here to pick up the pieces. Sarah gripped his hand. You saved my daughter. How can I ever repay you? Just be happy, he whispered. In the weeks that followed, Sarah spent her days caring for James at the hospital and her evenings with Emily. Richard visited often, bringing flowers and food. He was kind and understanding, but Sarah's heart was torn. One night, she sat between the 2 men who had shaped her new life. One who had saved her daughter, and one who had saved her soul. James looked at her gently. You don't owe me anything, Sarah. I'll always care for you, but you need to follow your heart. Richard took her hand. And whatever your heart decides, I'll respect it. Tears spilled down Sarah's face. You're both good men. You've both shown me love when I thought I didn't deserve it. But I can't rush this. I need to heal completely before I give my heart again. Both men nodded. They understood. And for the first time, Sarah felt peace. Not because she had chosen one of them, but because she had finally chosen herself. Months passed. James recovered, and Emily grew brighter each day. Sarah continued working, saving money, and writing her story. The story of love, loss, and survival. She titled it Love Beyond the Wheels. It became her therapy, a written redemption. When she finally finished, she showed it to Emily. Mom, it's beautiful, Emily said, eyes shining. It's our story. Sarah smiled. Yes, sweetheart. It's our journey. And maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else believe that love always finds its way back.
The seasons rolled by gently in Ravensfield, each one marking a quiet victory in Sarah Thompson's new life. It had been almost 2 years since she returned from the city. The old cottage now stood proudly again, its walls repainted, its garden blooming with sunflowers and roses. Emily's favorite. Every morning, Sarah woke to the sound of birds and the laughter of her daughter, who had grown into a curious, bright-eyed girl of 9. Come on, Mum, Emily would shout, running through the garden barefoot. You promised to help me feed the hens before school. Sarah would smile, tie her hair in a scarf, and chase after her. All right, Miss Farmer, lead the way. The simple life had returned, but this time it was different. There was peace. There was healing. And though Sarah often thought of her late husband, Daniel, the memories no longer hurt. They comforted her. Sometimes, she'd sit by the window and whisper, We made it, Daniel. She's growing, and I'm smiling again. Sarah's book, Love Beyond the Wheels, had quietly made its way beyond Ravensfield. She had sent it to a small publisher in Oxford months earlier, not expecting much. But one afternoon, a letter arrived, stamped with the publisher's seal. Dear Mrs. Thompson, we are moved by your manuscript. Your story is raw, powerful, and filled with hope. We would be honored to publish it. Yours sincerely, White Leaf Publishing House. Sarah gasped, reading it again and again. They want to publish my story, Emily squealed, jumping up and down. Mummy, you're going to be famous. Sarah laughed, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. Not famous, sweetheart, just heard. That's all I ever wanted. Within months, her book hit the shelves. It wasn't a bestseller overnight, but it touched lives. Letters began arriving from readers across the country. Widows, single mothers, and people who had lost everything yet found courage through her words. One letter read, Your story gave me strength to forgive myself. Thank you for reminding me that love never truly dies. Sarah would press each letter to her heart, whispering, Thank you, God. You turned my pain into purpose. One crisp autumn morning, as Sarah was preparing breakfast, there was a knock on the door. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened it. Standing there with a gentle smile was Richard Lawson. Richard, she gasped. I thought you'd gone back to London. He nodded. I did, but then I read your book. Sarah blushed slightly. You read it. He stepped inside, holding a copy of the book in his hand. The cover was worn from reading. Twice, he said softly. Every word felt like it was written from the depths of your soul. She smiled faintly. It was. He hesitated, his voice gentler now. I came back to see if you've forgiven me. Forgiven you? She repeated, confused. For leaving without saying goodbye, he said. I thought you needed time, space to heal, but I should have stayed. Sarah sighed, memories flickering in her eyes. You did what was right. I wasn't ready then, but I'm not angry. Life has its own timing. He smiled. Then maybe now is the right time? Before Sarah could answer, Emily came running in, her face lighting up. Mr. Lawson, you came back. He laughed, bending to hug her. "Yes, I did, young lady. And I see you've gotten taller." Sarah watched them with a soft heart. The sight of them together, the warmth, the laughter, stirred something deep within her. Maybe, just maybe, the universe was circling back to where it had always meant to lead her. A few weeks later, Ravensfield held its annual Harvest Festival, a celebration of gratitude and community. The village square was alive with music, laughter, and the sweet scent of baked pies. Sarah's cafe stall, where she sold homemade treats and signed copies of her book, drew a small crowd. Emily ran around helping, her cheeks flushed with excitement. James Carter, now fully recovered and running a successful delivery service, stopped by with flowers. "For the woman who keeps shining," he said warmly. Sarah smiled. "James, you always bring light wherever you go." He shrugged modestly. "Just doing my part." Then he glanced at Richard, who stood nearby helping Emily decorate the stall. For a moment, the two men locked eyes, not in rivalry, but mutual respect. James extended his hand. "She deserves to be happy. Make sure she is." Richard took it firmly. "That's the plan." Sarah, witnessing the exchange, felt tears well up. So much pain, so many years, and now peace. That night, as lanterns floated into the sky, she stood between the two men who had carried her through her darkest days. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being my strength when I had none." James smiled. "We only helped you see what was already inside you." Weeks later, as Sarah was sorting through old boxes in the attic, she found a sealed envelope she didn't recognize. It was addressed in Laura Miller's handwriting. Her heart skipped. "Laura!" She sat down slowly and opened it, her hands trembling. "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, it means fate has brought my letter to you at last. I want you to know I never meant to keep Emily from you. I did what I thought would save her when life had beaten me down. I prayed every night that you'd forgive me, that one day you'd both find happiness again. You were always the stronger one, Sarah. Never stop believing in love. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that endures storms. With all my heart, Laura." Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. She pressed the letter to her heart and whispered, "I forgive you, Laura, and I thank you." Emily came into the room and asked softly, "Mom, are you crying?" Sarah smiled through her tears. "No, darling. I'm remembering a friend who loved us very much." One evening, as winter's chill began to creep into the air, Richard invited Sarah and Emily for dinner at the small restaurant by the river. The lights reflected on the water, soft music playing in the background. Emily chattered happily about school, while Richard and Sarah shared quiet smiles. After dessert, Richard stood up and walked to Sarah's side. "Sarah," he said softly, "I've spent a lifetime searching for meaning. I thought I'd lost it when my wife passed away, until I met you." He reached into his pocket and knelt down, pulling out a small velvet box. Sarah gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Sarah Thompson," he continued, his voice trembling slightly, "you've shown me what resilience looks like. You've shown me grace, courage, and a love that heals. Will you give me the honor of walking beside you for the rest of our days?" The restaurant went silent. Even Emily's eyes widened with joy. "Mummy, say yes," she whispered loudly, making everyone laugh. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. For years, she had carried pain, loss, and loneliness. And now, life was offering her another chance. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Richard, I will." The crowd burst into gentle applause. Emily hugged them both tightly. "We're a family now." The wedding was small but beautiful. It took place in the garden of Sarah's cottage, under the same apple tree where she'd once reunited with Emily. Emily, dressed in a simple white gown, carried a bouquet of daisies and led her mother down the aisle. James stood proudly among the guests, smiling from the front row. Mrs. Henderson came all the way from Oxford to attend, beaming with pride. As Sarah walked toward Richard, sunlight filtered through the trees, dancing over her face. Her heart was calm, her steps steady. When they exchanged vows, Richard looked into her eyes and said, I promise to cherish the woman who taught me that love is not found. It's built through courage and faith. Sarah smiled, tears glistening. And I promise never to stop believing in second chances. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Emily shouted, "Finally!" And everyone laughed. They danced under the open sky, lanterns glowing like stars, the air filled with laughter and music. For Sarah, it wasn't just a wedding. It was the harvest, the reward for every tear, every prayer, every long night she'd endured. Years passed, and peace remained. Sarah and Richard built a new life together, blending love and purpose. Emily grew into a confident, kind young woman, talented, smart, and full of compassion. Sarah continued to write, her books inspiring thousands. Her story was adapted into a film titled Love Beyond the Wheels, which captured hearts across the country. Whenever people asked how she managed to survive such hardship, she would smile gently and say, "Because love never leaves. It just changes its shape until we're ready to see it again." James, now married to a nurse from the village, often visited with his children. Their laughter filled the cottage once more, echoing through time. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Sarah would sit with Richard on the porch, holding his hand, watching Emily chase the fireflies. Life had come full circle, from grief to grace, from ashes to beauty. On a quiet spring morning, years later, Sarah opened her window to the sound of the wind rustling through the apple tree. Her hair had silvered, her face lined with wisdom, but her eyes still held that same light, the light of a survivor. She sat by her writing desk and began her final note to her readers. "Dear friends, if you've walked with me through this journey, know this: love is not measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it transforms us. I left my home once, chasing survival. I returned to find my purpose. Every scar on our hearts is proof that we dared to live. And if ever you feel lost on life's road, remember, the same wheels that carry us away can always bring us home." She signed her name, Sarah Lawson, formerly Thompson. Then she smiled, closed her journal, and whispered into the soft morning air, "Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Laura. You both helped me find my way back." Outside, Emily's laughter echoed once more, joined by the steady footsteps of love that had come and stayed.